He was talking about how he doesn't get scared or he doesn't fear it. There's no PTSD from the situation. The guy's not scared to walk into another shop because he prays about it and you pray about it constantly.
I'll be honest, not constantly.
Okay, like how often are we talking?
I when it first happened, like I said, I wasn't as close to my faith at the time. So I wasn't praying for it at the time.
Yeah.
And I think then I wasn't like I didn't have PTSD, but I had a bit of like flinch moments, like what's that? Or like I'd be somewhere at night with the boys and I'll see someone in the background, whatever, just
put you on edge.
And I'll be like, oh, is this guy? Yeah. Like not in a PTSD form. Like it never really affected me that bad, and I got over it quite quickly. I think that was just more or so my personality working there.
Yeah.
But later on in life, it's not something I pray about all the time. No, it's maybe a few times I've prayed about it, and I've been like, oh.
Okay, but all these years later, it's still something that comes into your prayer life at some point.
Not really.
Really? Okay, so
I'll be honest.
It digressed. It
yes,
digressed.
I'll be honest.
So talk to me about that stat. Talk to me about being consumed with a fear, but finding your way out of it straight through prayer. Am I making sense with that? Because I think that's a very common thing that happens, Joey, in that big event happens in your life and you pray about it constantly. And then as time passes, it starts to digress. You don't pray about it as much because God's dealt with it in your life and you're able to move on from it. And I think the only way that you're going to be able to get over fear is through that prayer cycle.
Yeah, unfortunately in life, some things are very hard to get over. It's just how it is. And I struggle to understand how people can do it without God, because there's a lot of things in life in general, and especially in my life, where I look back and I'm like, I don't want to get over it. Not I want to get over it and I can't. I don't want to. But when you're a disciple of Christ, Christ requires you in following him to move on. Like in Philippians, it says, be anxious for nothing. It tells us to think of things that are true, that are of joy. So as a disciple, Christ wants us to move our thoughts from anything that causes us anxiety or stress or depression. And a lot of those thoughts come when you can't move on. And a lot more thoughts include like anger, sadness. God wants us to move on from these things. And how do we do that? Well, it says in Philippians, Paul says to think of things that are true, things that have joy. And out of all the things he's listed, he summarizes it in verse 8 and he says, and through this, you get joy. Through this, you can move on with God. It says at the end of verse 8. So, yeah, unfortunately, life is not easy. It's hard. And if you think that you're going to go through life and nothing bad's going to happen, or you're just going to be able to get over things easily because that's your personality, well, one day you're going to get hit by something big and it's just going to play in your mind and play in your mind. And I like what Albert said. Give it to God and God helps you move on. Easier said than done. Doesn't happen overnight. And it requires us to make the effort to think of things that are true, think of things that are good, and think of initially all these things represent God.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It's good.
I want to bring up that verse.
Trying to think of what I was going to say. Everything happens for a reason, right? I'm a big believer in that. But in a situation like what you went through, God allowed it for a reason. Now, that wasn't something that you knew at the time. That wasn't something you probably wouldn't have picked up on, like you mentioned at the time. But you said that was something that brought you closer at one point. Like it was just like a reminder of God and that he's watching, and that could have been a turning point in the sense of it could have actually gone really negative, but it didn't. And that was kind of like God saying to you, hey, like I'm present, I'm here, Yep. So I believe everything happens for a reason in that sense. I also believe that God was trying to get your attention there. And I think God does that in our lives, whether it be through things that we go through, something like, what you went through, or another traumatic experience, or sickness, or death, or something of others that we might know. It's to get us to be drawn back to Him in one way or another. So I'm a big believer in that everything happens for a reason in that sense. And I think obviously God did it, to be like, because, like, let's flip it. Say you were to die in that moment and you hadn't accepted Christ. The Bible talks about you being on your way to hell, right?
Yep.
In a way, that's kind of a second chance, And so when you think of it in that sense, that happened for a reason. That was just to get your attention. God does that at times. God gets our attention in different ways. I'm not going to say it's one way. There are thousands of ways God will get our attention. In that moment, I think that's probably what it was for you. And while you may not have realized at the time, and you might not have made a decision in that instant or a few days later, you said that you learned a lot later in life that you came back to that incident, and that was kind of like a turning point for you.
Yep.
So I believe God does these things to get our attention, to realize that we need to be dependent on Him. And at the end of the day, it's only through His strength that we can overcome the trials that we face and the situations that happen in life where we think we can't get over it, but God's like, I'll get you through it.
Yeah, 100%.
And just having that faith.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. He's in control, and I was thinking about that point as well. Like, he would have never had the opportunity to be saved, die then. So God protected him, had plans for him.